The Russian government has lost its long-running legal battle to build a new embassy complex in Canberra, less than 1 kilometre from Australia's Parliament House. The ruling, issued by the Australian Supreme Court on Wednesday, ends years of legal dispute and diplomatic tension between the two countries over a site that had become one of the most contested plots of land in the capital. The case began in 2008 when the Russian Federation obtained a 99-year lease on a parcel of land in Yarralumla, Canberra's diplomatic district. Moscow paid around $2 million for the property, intending to construct a modern embassy compound. The location, just 400 metres from Parliament House, initially drew little attention. But in recent years, Australia's intelligence agencies raised growing concern about the site's proximity to critical government infrastructure, warning that it could pose a security risk. By mid-2023, the Australian government had received classified advice from the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, known as ASIO, that a new Russian presence so close to Parliament House would represent an unacceptable risk. Acting on that advice, the government of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese introduced emergency legislation to terminate the lease and prevent construction. Parliament passed the measure within days. Albanese said at the time that the government had acted on very clear security advice about the risks posed by a new Russian presence so close to Parliament House. He emphasised that the move was about protecting national interests, not diplomatic retaliation. Foreign Minister Penny Wong added that no foreign mission should compromise the security of Parliament or government institutions. Russia condemned the decision and challenged it in court, arguing that it violated both Australian constitutional law and international diplomatic norms. The Russian embassy said the cancellation was politically motivated and infringed on sovereign property rights. Ambassador Alexei Pavlovsky called it a violation of basic diplomatic principles and vowed that Moscow would defend its rights through legal channels. In the months following the law's passage, tensions briefly spilled over onto the site itself. Australian federal police fenced off the land, but one Russian diplomat refused to leave, claiming he was protecting Russian territory. For several days, he remained in a small portable cabin on the otherwise empty block of land while police monitored the situation from a distance. The standoff ended peacefully, but it highlighted the unusual intersection of law, diplomacy, and national security at the heart of the case. The Russian government's legal team argued that the Albanese government's move was unconstitutional because Parliament could not unilaterally revoke a valid lease. They claimed the measure undermined the rule of law and violated Russia's property rights. Under Australian legislation, the Australian Solicitor General countered that the government had acted entirely within its powers, citing the need to prevent potential threats to national security. Officials said that intelligence information supported the decision but could not be disclosed publicly. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court of Australia sided with the government. The justices ruled unanimously that Parliament had acted lawfully when it revoked the lease in 2023. The court concluded that the legislation was valid, proportionate and consistent with Australia's constitutional framework. The judgment stated that the government was entitled to take measures to protect the integrity and security of its institutions. However, the court also ruled that Australia must compensate Russia for financial losses resulting from the revoked lease, including the original payment for the land and limited site costs. No specific amount was made public, but officials indicated the compensation would likely be in the low millions of dollars. The ruling formally ends Russia's right to develop the site, though it allows the government to retain its existing embassy in the Canberra suburb of Griffith, several kilometres away from the parliamentary zone. The land in Yarralumla remains fenced and empty, its construction equipment removed. Footage taken in mid-2023 shows the plot overgrown with grass, surrounded by barriers, with Parliament House visible in the background, a constant reminder of the security concerns that prompted the case. Australian security officials have consistently warned of growing foreign interference risks. ACO's Director General Mike Burgess said in his 2023 annual report that foreign espionage and interference now posed a greater threat to Australia than terrorism. He did not name Russia directly, but the timing of his remarks coincided with the government's move to block the embassy project. National security analysts said the decision reflected a broader pattern among Western nations to reassess foreign diplomatic construction projects, particularly those involving countries under sanctions or strategic scrutiny. Following the court's decision, the Russian embassy in Canberra issued a statement saying it regrets the politically motivated decision of the Australian authorities and would consider further actions to protect its interests. Russian state media described the ruling as an unfriendly gesture, though the Kremlin has not commented publicly. Diplomatic analysts believe Moscow is unlikely to escalate the matter, given that the judgment leaves room for compensation. Within Australia, the outcome has drawn broad political support. Opposition leader Peter Dutton said the ruling confirmed that national security must always come first. He added, the government was right to act swiftly to protect the Parliament precinct from undue foreign presence. Some legal scholars, however, cautioned that the case raised questions about the precedent of cancelling property rights through legislation, even for security reasons. Nonetheless, public sentiment has overwhelmingly backed the government's stance. Polls conducted after the 2023 decision showed more than 80% of Australians supported preventing the Russian development. The dispute unfolded amid worsening relations between Australia and Russia following Moscow's war in Ukraine. Canberra has imposed sanctions on Russian officials and industries and supplied military and humanitarian assistance to Kyiv. The embassy case has added to the diplomatic chill, but is not expected to lead to any further downgrades in relations. Both governments maintain limited but functional diplomatic contact. The Supreme Court's ruling marks the end of a 15-year saga that began as a routine real estate arrangement and evolved into a high-profile test of national sovereignty. For Australia, the verdict affirms its ability to act preemptively on intelligence warnings to safeguard critical institutions. For Russia, it represents the loss of a strategically located diplomatic foothold in the Australian capital, albeit with compensation. As of now, the disputed plot remains empty, its fences standing where construction was once planned to begin. Birds wander through the grass, a quiet contrast to the international dispute it once symbolised. The Australian government says the site will remain under its control and will not be allocated for foreign diplomatic use. The ruling stands as a reminder of how security considerations can reshape even the most ordinary diplomatic agreements. What began as a 99-year lease has ended with a Supreme Court judgment and the firm conclusion that national security outweighs diplomatic convenience. Russia will receive compensation for the revoked lease, but Australia's top court has made it clear no new Russian embassy will be built near Parliament House. The Australian government has indicated that it considers the matter closed, but officials have left open the possibility of limited future discussions with Russia over the financial settlement process. Legal experts say negotiations may continue over the exact compensation amount and the timeframe for payment, but those talks are expected to be handled quietly through diplomatic channels rather than in public view. Canberra has stressed that while it values the principles of international law and diplomatic engagement, its priority remains the protection of national institutions from potential foreign threats, a message that reflects a broader shift in Australian policy toward tighter control of foreign influence and security-sensitive land use.